the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. I will put that on there too. And a few definitions, or the peace officer and police officer is. It is essential. So I'm going to hit the next page here. This is from The Guardian. But I'd like to thank Jack Blood, before I keep going here. I'd like to thank Jack Blood for sending this to me via email on Who, What, Why. I think he is good. So go to jackblood.com. Or Deadline Info. Deadline Info, right? Deadlive.info, excuse me. Just search engine jackblood.com. And you get the sites. He's really cool, very anti-New World Order, got the punk rock attitude. And I will proceed to the next page, and it is entitled, from The Guardian, "The truth is out. Money is just an IOU, and the banks are rolling it in." Oh yeah, that is a fact. This is written by David Gaber from TheGuardian.com, and I like the little title here: "The Bank of England's dose honesty throws the theoretical..." Get the hell out of here. Excuse me here. "Theoretical basis for austerity out the window." Back in the 1930s, Henry Ford is supposed to have remarked that it was a good thing that most Americans didn't know how banking really works, because if they did, there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning. Last week, something remarkable happened. The Bank of England let the cat out of the bag in the paper called "Money Creation in the Modern Economy," co-authored by 3 economists from the bank's monetary analyst Decorate, which the link, you can look at the link too. They stated outright the most common assumptions of how banking works are simply wrong, and that kind of populist heterodox positions, more ordinarily associated with groups such as Occupy Wall Street, are correct. In doing so, they have effectively thrown the entire theoretical basis of austerity out the window. To get a sense of how radical the bank's new position is, consider the conventional view, which continues to be the basis of all respectable debate on public policy. People put their money in banks. Banks then lend that money out of interest, either to consumers or to entrepreneurs willing to invest it in some profitable enterprise. The true fractional reserve system does not allow banks to lend out considerably more than they hold in reserve. And true, if savings don't suffice, private banks can seek to borrow more from the central bank. The central bank can print much money as it wishes, but it is also careful not to print too much. In fact, we are often told this is why independent central banks exist in the first place. If federal governments could print money themselves, they surely would put it out too much of it, and the resulting inflation would throw the economy into chaos. Institutions such as the Bank of England or the U.S. Federal Reserve were created to carefully regulate the money supply to prevent inflation. This is why they are forbidden to directly fund the government, say by buying treasury bonds, but instead fund private economic activity that the government merely taxes. It is the understanding that allows us to continue to talk about money as if it were a limited resource like bauxite or petroleum, to say there is just not enough money to fund social programs, to speak of the immortality of government debt or of public spending crowding the public sector. What the Bank of England admitted this week is what none of us is really true. To quote from its own initial summary, rather than banks receiving deposits when withholding households saves, and then lending them out. Bank lending creates deposits. In normal time, the central bank does not fix the amount of money in circulation, nor is central bank multiplied up into more loans and deposits. In other words, everything we know is not just wrong, it is backwards. When banks make loans, they create money. It is because money is really just an IOU. The role of central bank is to preside over legal order that effectively grants banks to exclusive rights to create IOUs of a certain kind, ones that the government will recognize as legal tender by its willingness to accept them in payment of taxes. There's really no limit on how much banks could create, provided they can find someone willing to borrow it. They will never get caught short for the simple reason that borrowers do not, generally speaking, take the cash and put it under their mattresses. Ultimately, any money and bank loans out will just end up back in the some bank again. So for the banking system as a whole, every loan just becomes another deposit. What's more, insofar as banks do need is acquire funds from the central bank. They can borrow as much as they like. All the latter really does is the rate of interest, the cost of money, not its quantity. Since the beginning of the recession, the U.S. and British central banks have reduced that cost to almost nothing. In fact, with quantitative easing, they've been effectively pumping as much money as they can do into the banks without producing any inflationary effects. What it means is that the real limit on the amount of money in circulation is not how much the central bank is willing to lend, but how much banks, government, firms, and ordinary citizens are willing to borrow. Government spending is the main driver in all this, and the paper does admit, if you read it carefully, that the central banks does fund the government at all. So the next question of public spending crowding out private investments is exactly the opposite. Why did the Bank of England suddenly admit all this? Well, one reason is because it's obviously true. The bank's job is to actually run the system, and of late, the system has not been running especially well. It is possible that it decided that maintaining the Fantasyland version of the economics that has proved so convenient to the rich is simply a luxury it can no longer afford. But politically, it is taking a numerous risk. Just as consider what might happen if the mortgage holders realize the money the bank lent them is not really the life savings of some thirsty pensioner, but something the bank just whisked into existence, though its possession of a magic wand which we, the public, handed over to it. Historically, the Bank of England has tended to be a bellwether, stalking out seen radical positions that ultimately becomes new orthodoxies. If that's what's happening here, we might soon be in a position to learn if Henry Ford was right. The Bank of England finally repented. And it's a fact, my friends. And if you study history, when fiat, if I'm correct, fiat in Latin is how far can it last, or how long can it run, really affected a lot of countries. In 1920s, they printed the Central Bank of Germany, that they had their own Federal Reserve. They printed money, the Reichsmark, out of thin air, completely to pay off their World War I restitution. From 1922 to 1928, 6 years, their money was so crappy to the rest of the world. The people in Berlin started throwing their money on the streets. Everyone, and all the suckers were getting their wheelbarrows, picking it up, thought they were rich, they were happy, and they were so naive. I'm a millionaire. They went to the store. The store clerk's like, what the hell is this? Guy goes, I'm here to buy everything. He goes, nope, you can't even buy a loaf of bread for it. And what happened? National Socialist Party, Workers' Party, took advantage of it. The acronym, Nazis. And who became chancellor? Adolf Hitler. Something to think about. That's just an example. Happened in Germany, Argentina, Zimbabwe, what's a few other places? Rwanda. Yeah, Rwanda too, my friends. Like putting money out of thin air. And that's why the whole central banking system is very dangerous. Andrew Jackson, on his tombstone, said, I beat the banks. I'm not saying some of his actions were great. However, when it came to the banking system, he hated it with the passion. He even made statements to his troops, burn that building down. If anyone's in it, so be it, because they're treasonous. And the fact is this, if you read the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Congress is supposed to regulate money. Same article, Section 10, gold and silver coins are money. The word, sound money. Paper money is very dangerous. In addition, when George Washington signed the Coinage Act of 1792, he made a statement to his colleagues. If anyone who creates paper money deserves to be hanged. That's all I have to say on that. So look it up, and I'm going to do one quote on Jefferson, which is page 551 from the book The Real Thomas Jefferson. And it says here, the importance of gold and silver. One of the great advantages of a species as a medium is that, being of universal value, is keeping it itself at a general level. This is agreed by Adam Smith, the principal advocate for paper circulation, but advocating it on a sole condition that will be strictly regulated. He admits, nevertheless, that the commerce and industry of a country cannot be so secured when suspended on the Daedalian wing of paper money as when on the solid ground of gold and silver. That was written to John W. Epps in 1813. And, of course, that's why Thomas Jefferson did not like Hamilton. They were arch enemies because Hamilton was a banker. He supported controlling the American people when it became a new nation. So I recommend to check out this book called Hamilton's Curse, which was written by Thomas J. DiLorenzo. And you'd be surprised that his legacy lives on today. All right. And then I'd like to thank Liberty Choir for that page as well. And I'm going to hit one more. This is from the Liberty Choir themselves. And it was today, March 24th. And it was written by Jeffrey Tucker. And it is entitled, Our World Through Thomas Paine's Eyes. I spent a harrowing weekend reflecting on Thomas Paine's Common Sense, the pamphlet that came out in January 1776 and turned the public towards seeking independence from Britain. I say harrowing because the distance between the ideas found in this pamphlet and those of today's America is so vast as to be nearly unrecognizable. The presumption throughout the text is that tyranny should never again be tolerated. Despotism was for the old world. Tyranny was outdated. It belonged nowhere in a land convened in liberty. The only question is how to overthrow despotic rule. The upshot of Paine's book, what now is the time, waiting would only lead to calamity. He worked. It worked. He got his revolution. The British were defeated, and America was born. Freedom has its asylum. The world began anew, full of promise. And then, in a matter of 50 years, the American experience changed everything. The middle class was born. Lives lengthened. The standard of living soared to new heights. Technology took over. Spectacular things were everywhere. Freedom has done its work. It had liberated the human mind to create, build, empower, and change the face of the earth. Then something changed again. When? Maybe it was during the Civil War. Maybe during World War I. FDR and the Great Depression entrenched it. or maybe it was gaslessness of World War